Hello, humans. It's your host, Kory, and we're back with another episode of A Well Cared For Human. And today I'm here with seasoned Serene, who is a passionate advocate for authenticity and inclusion. She used to be very hesitant about expressing her true self, but she has found the courage to embrace her identity after meeting her wife of 8 years. This transformative experience inspired her to dedicate herself to empowering young people. Season has volunteered with middle and high school students, founded an LGBTQ youth group, and honed her communication skills through Toastmasters, ultimately becoming a national speaker for youth audiences with a mission to create self-inclusive spaces. And we're so excited to have Season here with us today. Welcome to the show, Season.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start off by asking you about the kind of experiences that you've had so far. So I know you from a fellow speaker group. That's how we've met. And then we ended up doing some co-working and building our speaking businesses side by side. And so I know a lot about what you're up to, but the listeners do not know what you've been doing. And so thinking about the context of all the things that you're working on right now, you have one business, you're trying to build another, you are a mother, you're a married partner, you've got a lot going on. So in this context, what does self-care and wellness look like for you in your life right now?
Well, according to your pillars, so as far as the body goes, I go hiking and I try to spend as much time out in nature as possible. And I also try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. That's very important because
That's very hard.
Yes, a tired season is a cranky season. So
yes, sleep is really hard. We're struggling in our house to get enough sleep. We're both kind of night owls and we're trying to regulate ourselves, and we're resisting. We're resisting the urge to stay up late, to be on our phones, to check things out. So good for you for getting enough sleep. You only need 7 to 8 hours to feel rested.
yes, that's what I need. And unfortunately, right now, that includes having to keep our dog outside of our room because she is very noisy and she's old and I feel really terrible, but I need my sleep. So there you have it.
No guilt, no guilt. Yeah, ours sleeps in a crate. Max sleeps in a crate at night, but I don't know how I would sleep if he was with, I mean, I do know how I would sleep because we just had to do it while we were traveling. And I get paws in my face and he's lying all over me. And so it's definitely not conducive to sleep sometimes when you have the dog in the room. So I totally understand. Now, which of these pillars, because you've brought them up, and for those of the listeners who maybe this was their first episode or they're not familiar with the 4-pillar model, that is the pillar model that I refer to when I say a well cared for human, and it's represented by your relationship with your body. That's the first pillar. Your relationship with your mind and emotions. That's the second pillar. Your relationship with spirit. Spirit is a really vague word, but that can be your connection to joy, happiness, meaningful work. If you were a religious or spiritual person, it'd be your connection to God. And then the fourth pillar is your connection, your relationship with connection. I put the emphasis on connection, not people, because it's not necessarily how you are with other people. It's more how do you feel about being vulnerable? How do you feel about putting yourself out there, getting to know others, being in that space? And so in that model, what do you feel like has been the most challenging for you to build? Where have you seen the most growth? Kind of take us through what building your relationship with yourself has looked like over time.
Well, the body pillar has definitely been the hardest for me. I have a condition that causes me to be in pain quite a lot of the time. So often I'm frustrated with the body that I've been given. So that is by far the hardest one, and takes the most effort. Just kind of trying to like the body that I'm in, which I don't often.
Yeah, that's really hard. I know that several of our listeners, they have written into the show and they've told me about their experiences with chronic pain. Chronic pain is often connected to trauma. There's a correlation between the two. It's like if you've had a very difficult traumatic life, you're more likely to develop chronic pain or a condition that has chronic pain. And it can be really difficult to manage, not just in the physical symptoms, but the mental ones as well. Like you're saying, the frustration, the maybe anger, the difficulties of finding love and compassion for yourself when you feel like you're being tortured by something that's supposed to be on your side. Like it's supposed to be you making your life easier and not harder.
Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge. And then you asked where I've felt the most growth. And that would definitely be the mind and emotions pillar. I've had lots of therapy, and I feel like the
Haven't we
way
all? No, but we should.
we should, everybody should be in therapy. Um, and for me, therapy has and just the way I look at myself and how I communicate with myself, uh, the thoughts that go through my mind, those type of things, like I've seen the most growth there and how I speak to myself. And if I make a mistake, for instance, I'm not like, you're so stupid or whatever. I tend to have more compassion for myself. So that's probably where I've seen the most growth.
Yeah, it can be really hard, that cyclic nature of speaking really poorly to yourself. It's almost compulsive. At least it was for me when I was raised in these really abusive environments. I developed this internal dialogue that very much mimicked kind of the way that my abusers spoke to me, right? And so it's like that becomes embedded when you're a child, and then you grow up and you talk to yourself the same way. Even if you are lucky enough to escape the person in your life who's being abusive, it's like you take that venom, that poison with you, and then you have to unlearn it. You're like, I can't be the one who's being mean to me. It's so hard. And so it's definitely a challenge to overcome. What would you say has been some of the most helpful techniques in working with that really difficult voice that you've had in your mind? Like, how have you managed to deprogram it? Is there anything in particular, like did something that you learned in therapy or just something you came across on your own that has been effective in that deprogramming process?
I would say probably the most effective thing has been EMDR therapy, which
Okay.
is eye movement desensitization reprogramming, I think is what it
Reprogram.
stands for.
Okay, let's talk about EMDR therapy, because I've heard it mentioned before, not just by you, but by other people, but I don't know a lot about it. And there's a great possibility that our listeners also don't know a lot about it. So take us through it. What is it? What is it used for? Is it something that you do with the therapist or you do it on your own? Like, what can you tell us about it?
Well, I heard about it actually, I think on a podcast somewhere or came across it. And so basically I do it with my therapist, and there's different ways you can do it. Some people have like a light bar that the light goes back and forth across the bar, and so you just follow it with your eyes. Um, Sometimes people just look left to right while they're doing it. I personally hold on to, they're called tappers, and so one will vibrate and then the other one will vibrate. And so I don't relive, I revisit a traumatic experience, and then I go through different steps of, I kind of just watch it play through, and then I might see it from like a bird's eye view. And then I always end by going in as a helper to myself and like, what did little season need? Or adult season, because I've done it for adult trauma as well. And then it takes that, so it's like the mind kind of gets stuck in
Hmm.
that traumatic response, whatever that might be. And this is helping to reprogram it to both sides of the brain, because it often gets stuck on whichever side is like the emotional side. And you're like, logically, I know that this is not like, I'm not in this place that I was when I was a child, but now I'm still reacting in this weird way, this unhelpful way. And I can try to logically say, oh, it's not like I'm not that child anymore. But often it gets stuck, like the trauma gets stuck in the emotional side. So this helps like get it onto both sides so that your whole brain is kind of processing it.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it's definitely been my experience that I am a hyper intellectual person. And so I intellectualize the terrible things. I'm like, let's just think this through. But the reality is that moving most of your trauma, it's not something you can think through. Even if you can logically give reasons like, oh, he was a terribly abusive person, for like, even if you could like define it like in a way that made sense, quote, air quotes, for the
Mhm.
ones who are listening to this on Spotify, you can't see me making the air quotes in my mind, but it quote makes sense, right? Emotionally, there's that part of you that emotionally has to work through that experience. And so I think that if I was to try this therapy with someone, they'd be like, it's all stuck in your emotional side. That's where we'd be working at, because it does get stuck over there. And I think I make it worse by over intellectualizing it, over analyzing it to try to, feel more control or feel safer or whatever it is that we use those mental faculties for to try to process things that have happened. But you're right, it's not just a mental experience, it's also an emotional one. And so if we don't work through that, it gets stuck. And so how long have you been doing this type of therapy?
Just a little over a year,
Okay.
and I can share an experience if you would like to have.
Sure. If you're comfortable, yeah, you don't have to
Oh,
share like
yeah.
anything. If it's like because I don't know what part of the traumatic experience you worked through, but if you want to like tell us about the therapy session, that'd be great. Yeah.
So for instance, my stepmother was a narcissist, I believe, never diagnosed,
They
but
rarely are diagnosed.
yeah,
I've said that before. I'm like, listen, I'm like, if anyone can pin my father down to the ground and give him this exam, I was like, I'm 100% certain that he would be a textbook example because he just really is. And we do throw that word around casually, narcissist, right? Where we say, oh, that person's so narcissistic, but we're talking about someone with narcissistic personality disorder, which is like an actual constellation of traits that creates these abusive behaviors in the way that they treat their children. And so
right.
you have a narcissistic stepmother.
Stepmom,
Hmm.
right, and I'm 7 years old, and I'm sick, and I get called up to dinner, and I go to walk up, and we had, like, a split level, so I go to walk up, like, the 7 stairs, and I collapse on the stairs, and I cannot move, like, I just can't. I have no energy, I cannot move up the stairs, and my dad didn't step in very often, but that time he was like, "Okay, that's it, I'm taking her to the hospital," and my stepmother said, "She's not worth spending the money on. Wait until Monday and take her to the regular doctor." It was Friday, I believe. And thankfully, my dad took me to the hospital where I was admitted and I stayed there for 7 days. And my very grave illness was that I had strep throat.
Hmm.
But because they didn't take me to the doctor, because she didn't want to spend the money on me. And this wasn't a case of, oh, we don't have the money. We had
Hmm.
plenty of money. They bought a new car like every 2 to 3 years.
Right.
She just didn't want to spend it on me. And so, anyways, I go to the hospital. I'm in there for 7 days because I'm severely dehydrated. And those words stuck with me. So I internalized that I wasn't worthy of spending money on. I wasn't worthy of medical care. I wasn't worthy of just basic human decency.
Yeah.
And so I tried to like work through it on my own for quite a few years. And then when I finally did the EMDR therapy, it was like I used to go and I would go to the store and I would be going to get ice cream, and my favorite ice cream is like $1 more than the other ice cream that's on sale, and I would argue with myself in the store about spending that extra dollar, and after the therapy, I no longer have to do that. Like, I saw a pair of shoes I wanted. I was like, "Oh my gosh, they're purple, bright purple Converse." I'm like, "I want those." And I just bought them. And I had
Yeah.
never done that. Like, I would agonize over decisions of spending money on myself. If
Hmm.
going to get healthcare was a big problem too, like, I would not wanna spend money on, going to the chiropractor or something like that until I was in so severe pain that I couldn't function.
Yes, and it might seem like a really simple example, but it's a really great example of how even in really small ways, like this punishing remark that she made, this thing that it gets internalized, and then we live our entire lives that way. Something as simple as I shouldn't have that ice cream. I shouldn't spend the extra dollar. It's like make yourself happy. Like if that's the one you really want, like it's $1. Like if I framed it to you in a different way that was like, is your happiness worth $1? You'd be like, yes, of course. Like, why wouldn't I spend $1 to make myself happy? It's not a big thing, but we get them kind of mixed up in our minds about like, oh, I can't do this, or it's not okay to do this, or I'm not worth this. And so I'm so glad you're working through that. I'm
Oh,
happy
I've
for you.
worked through it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, yeah, I have a similar thing that I haven't done this kind of therapy, but I'd be curious to know what they would do with me. I have a specific memory that's stuck in my mind, which is where we came home from school. And I think I've shared this not just on the podcast, but in my book as well, where it was like we came home from school and I had like given him my report card. And he was like, my dad, he was like, he's like, no matter what you do, you're never going to be any better than your mother. And it was like that definitely planted the seed of no matter how hard I work or what I try to do, like there's a limit, right? And that limit will always be below the threshold of quote enough or like good enough or anything like that. And so I'm sure there's some emotions that I should do some rapid eye movement look as if light bars are something that should be moved because I've intellectualized it to death, but I don't know that I've completely processed the feelings behind that for sure. And I'm sure there's many of us that feel that way as well. And so it's been very helpful for you, this kind of therapy.
Very helpful for so many things, and things I didn't even realize were affecting me. Um, like for instance, I've been in a car accident when I was 4, and uh, and my dad kept joking about me killing the rabbit, and because my this was early 80s, and so I shattered the front windshield with my forehead, and because I was in the front seat with no seatbelt. And I didn't receive any medical care, and then he kept joking about how I killed the rabbit, and I thought I killed a real rabbit, but it would turns
Mm.
out the car was a Volkswagen Rabbit. I
Oh,
didn't know
wow.
that,
Okay.
I was 4, and so when I did EMDR therapy on that, it it not only, um, just helped kind of process that memory, but I didn't realize I had had such a traumatic experience to roadkill, like, all these years, my entire life. Like, if I saw something dead on the side of the road, I averted my eyes or even closed them. I know it's not safe. Don't do that.
Don't close. Season's not saying that you should close your eyes when you're driving a vehicle.
No,
Disclaimer.
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 But I would do that, like, it was an automatic response, and then after I did the EMDR therapy, all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, I can be like, oh, that was a fox, that's so sad."
Mhm.
Whereas before I could never do that. So that was like an unintended, well, I mean, not that my dad intended anything, but that was like a weird kind of linked reaction to a traumatic experience I had when I was 4 that I didn't
Mhm.
even know were linked. And then after I did the EMDR, I was like, "Ah, this is interesting. Now I can look at roadkill." Not like I'm gonna go up and touch it or anything. No, thank you. I'm not that interested, but I can look at it without having to, like, close my eyes. So,
Yes.
I've become a safer driver too.
That's the poster, the billboard for advertising this type of therapy. They're like, "You will be a better driver." You're less likely to kill animals or anyone else on the road if you do this type of therapy. But I do get what you're saying about how something that starts in a particular fashion, it evolves. There's something that happens in the mind, some kind of prismatic effect where it came in as one thing, but then the mind distorts it or it extends it into other areas, and we don't always immediately know the connotations, like what it was that created this separate trigger, this separate experience. And so I think many people can relate to that aspect of trauma and overcoming trauma for sure. And so my next question for you, because you just touched on having a narcissistic stepmother, I know that narcissism, again, being a specific kind of constellation of behaviors, is particularly in the dynamic between parents and children, because children are so dependent and in so much need of their parents, like love and approval. And that's like the worst position to be in with a narcissist because it's like not only will they not give it to you or they're incapable of giving it, but they'll use it against you to punish you and manipulate you and to create these sort of outcomes. So it's a really dangerous dynamic in particular. But do you have anything to say about your experiences with narcissism, how you feel like maybe it broke down your 4 pillars and maybe self-care tactics that you've relied on in addition to the therapy that you mentioned that have kind of helped you heal that narcissistic wounding? Because I know that there are many listeners who have experienced narcissism to some degree or another, or even toxic relationships that might benefit from your experiences.
Yeah, I would say it probably affected all 4 of my pillars. The biggest one probably would be the mind and emotions, though. That one, I mean,
Because it's so manipulative. Yeah, it is really like
yes.
a mental warfare. You enter like a mental warfare space about like your right to exist and to have thoughts and to be a person versus, the will of this other person. So definitely I can see that for sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, it did affect all 4 of them, but that one probably the biggest one, and so, yeah, the very first thing I would say is therapy, and then
Therapy, good.
boundaries.
Yes.
Boundaries are important, like, I do not see my dad or my stepmom, I haven't seen them since I was, I don't know, 18, I think was probably, like, the last time, and lots of journaling. I also had experience with my ex-husband was also a narcissist, so when I was going through times where he was really trying to, because it was involving our children, so he was trying to get at me through the children, and so I did lots of journaling and lots of hiking, um, because those are the things that bring me peace and, help me to process what I'm going through and to kind of take a step back. So yeah, those would be like kind of the 3 things or 4 things, I guess: therapy, boundaries, journaling, and hiking.
Yes, it's interesting because two of them are relational, obviously, like the boundaries and telling people I'm not going to be in contact with you if you can't respect my peace of mind. And so that's definitely important. And there's a whole kind of process that goes into deciding whether or not you need to be no contact with someone. There are some people who don't have the luxury. Because I'm always like, no contact, escape, escape. But I'm like, I need to be realistic. Some people can't yet go non-contact, like either they're too young or they're in a situation where they're financially dependent on that person and they can't yet, sacrifice their financial safety to get away, but they are planning to. So there's a spectrum there, right? But also, what I'm hearing you say is the things like journaling and hiking, those are all grounding activities. Like, those are very much to help you get back in your body, in your own self, which I think is a really good antithesis to kind of the mental warfare of working with a narcissist or experiencing a narcissist, right? Because that's very much in the mind. Like, the battleground is in the mind. And so anything you can do to get out of the mind and away from the war, to bring you back to yourself, that's going to be especially helpful. And that's been my experience too. So it's great to hear you echo that as well. Now, I know that you're also a person of faith, that you have a really strong relationship to that spiritual aspect of yourself, that you identify as Christian. And so, as a member of the LGBTQ community, I know that, at least from my experiences, that the Christian community is not always supportive of people who identify in that way. And so, have you had any experiences that maybe we would call religious trauma or rejection from your community? And then how did you kind of work through that? How did you find a way to keep this strong relationship with God, with your spirit? But even though this kind of, I don't want to say conflict, but because it's not always that way. I have some amazing Christians in my life who are very loving and kind, and I don't know where I'd be without their love and support. But there's this issue. It's like when someone says, "Hi, I'm a Christian," you're like, okay,
What kind?
what
What kind of
kind?
Christian
Like,
are you?
how do you feel about gay people? Like, just on a scale of 1 to 10, like, do you think I deserve to burn for 10,000 years, or like, are you cool? Me as a human, like, do you think I have worth and value? Like, and so it can be tricky. So tell me about these experiences that you've had and kind of how you found like a place of peace, I guess, amidst that conflict, so to speak.
Yeah, so I have experienced a little bit of religious trauma. I had a church I was going to, and um, they were all love the sinner, hate the sin kind
Hmm.
of mentality. And then every single time I was there, somehow it was brought up. Every single time. If I
Oh
wasn't there,
God.
I would ask other people, and it was never brought up. It was only when I
Mm.
was there.
Oh goodness.
So that was fun. Um, but there was a point where I was struggling so much that, like, mentally, that I would go for walks, and I would literally, with every single step, be like, "God loves me." And that's all I would just repeat it as I walked. And so I think that kind of is what got me through it. And then I did kind of have this middle of the night experience where I heard a voice saying, "I love you." And I was like, "But is it okay to be gay?" And "I love you." And I'm like, "But is it a sin to be gay?" "I love you." And I'm like, "This is not what I'm asking. I'm asking a yes or no question." It's simple. And then I finally realized that we are all loved no matter
Hmm.
what. Like, it
Hmm.
does not matter. Even my stepmom, who was absolutely horrid to me, even the murderer, you know,
Hmm.
your uncle, they're
Yeah, my uncle.
we're all loved, right? And it's kind of a hard pill to swallow. But when I live out from that aspect of that everybody is loved, no matter what, I can I don't know, I just move through the world in a different way. And then I found a community, a church community that, believes that I am loved and wholeheartedly says that and believes everybody is loved. And so that's helped me keep that relationship, I guess, with God. And I don't know, I wish everybody could have that experience, but I know not everybody does. But before I had that experience, that was when I was, just walking and asking and then just being like, God loves me, and just saying it over and over again.
So it sounds like you trusted how you felt about it, your relationship with God without necessarily letting in all these other external voices telling you what God is, whether or not you deserve the love, whether or not you get to have a relationship with God, whether or not you're okay as a human, right? Because that stuff I think can complicate the situation, right? When other people kind to try to superimpose that aspect onto it. But if you hold the position that God is love and everyone is loved, and you're right, it is a tough pill to swallow because I know for a fact that my family dynamics, for example, very complicated. And it's like, yeah, my uncle did this terrible thing to my mother, but my mother was also a challenging person. But did she deserve to be challenging because this happened to her? And so it's like, it's a mess. Like humans are a mess. And
Hmm.
because we're a mess, it's like if you say that humans are worthy and loved, you mean all of them. Like you have to
Right.
mean all of them, even the ones that are the most challenging. We can say like the most challenging, like they are still lovable and they're still worthy. And
Right,
so
because if they're not if the challenging ones aren't loved, then what's special about me that makes me loved, right?
exactly,
Where do you draw that line? So it's
yeah,
actually I find it's actually easier to just think that we're all loved and
it
go
is.
from there.
Yeah, and for me, another good context is that I think about my mom and I can tell because there's even a comment. So if you went to my book page on Amazon, I don't remember how many reviews the book has, but one of them is like just another white trash human. So I know that people think about like my mother in a certain context, like, oh, she struggled with addiction and oh, she did these terrible things. And I'm like, but she absolutely deserved to be loved. Like she had some terrible things happen to her as a child, like things that absolutely broke her mentally and spiritually, emotionally. So to say that like she's not worthy just because she made these mistakes, like if I can love my mother, I think I can love anyone. And if I can love anyone, certainly something as grand as God.
Right.
Like if I can do it, and I'm definitely not God level, right? I'm just another human. So if I could do it, surely something like God could love other people, all the people, no matter their
And that
mistakes.
brings up a good point. You talk about your mom's story, and well, your uncle had a story too,
It
right?
did,
He
yeah.
he didn't just come out of the womb like ready to kill somebody, right?
Yeah.
It's there's life experiences shape us.
Yes, they do. And it's usually complicated. And there is some research suggesting that so people are like, well, what if you do have like a baby psychopath that like has psychopathic tendencies at like 2 years old or something? And it's like, well, they're showing us now that trauma in the womb, like
Mhm.
even 3 generations back. So it's like, yeah, but still, like even if it was just stored in the bodies, like in the epigenetics, I'm blanking right now. I think it's Mark not Mark Wahlberg, not him, not the actor, but there's a writer of a similar name. And it's like there's something about generational trauma. He has a book. I'll have to link it in the show notes of the episodes so people know what I'm talking about. But there was a study where they subjected mice to the scent of cherry blossoms and they shocked them. I hate studies like this where they tell me terrible things they did to animals, but they scent of cherry blossoms shocked the mouse, and then the next generation of mouse, when they were presented with the smell of cherry blossoms, they reacted fearfully, even though they were never shocked. So it's like there's
Mhm.
something that's carrying over by generational contact, right? Like, so something that happened to my mother, even though I was not born yet, right? I was just like a cell in her body as a child, right? That would later become a person. Things that happened to that body, I have inherited, like they're part of me. And so we're all interconnected from many generations back. And so it's hard to separate that out and be like, well, from birth, you should have been. It's like, well, I don't know. I think we needed to go back like 100 years. We needed to help great grandpa get himself together.
Right.
Actually, we were going to be okay. So it is complicated. It's definitely complicated. Thinking about your experiences, I want to return to this idea of you as a speaker because I know that from a narcissistic wounding perspective, it can be very scary to speak up. It can be very scary to wield your voice in certain spaces. So tell me about how you came to be a speaker, why you felt like it was a really important calling for you, why you were moving in this direction, and give us a little bit about how that's fitting into your relationship with yourself.
Okay. Well, you kind of touched on it right there. I do feel like it's a calling. Like this is not just something I want to do. It's like something I feel like
It's too
I
scary.
cannot get away from.
It's too scary to someone just, I mean, I'm sure there are some amazing extroverts out there that just wake up and be like, I'm gonna be a speaker, but not me.
Well, I am an amazing extrovert, but this was not like something I'm like, oh, like growing up as a kid, I'm like not like, oh, I want to speak in front of everybody. No, that was horrible. Having to go up in front of the class and give a book report or whatever. But yeah, so why do I do this? So I volunteer both in the school setting and I started the LGBT youth group, and I have noticed not just from the youth, but I noticed their parents and my friends and myself, obviously, that we all have these feelings of just being unworthy or not good enough or not loved, um, or that we have to fit in. We have to change ourselves so we can fit in. And so as I've gone along on this journey, and I've learned a lot from a lot of different people, and I realized I'm like, I started telling people, like in my own personal life, if my friend said, "Oh, I can't eat that, I'm too fat," I would be like, "Oh, but you're beautiful," you know?
Yeah.
And, "Oh, and well, I can't, I want to go, I was thinking about going back to school, but I'm not sure if I can actually do that." Well, you could do it if you really want to, you can do anything you put your mind to. And I started seeing in the kids that I work with and telling them that they're worthy of, love and attention and all of that, and worthy of my time as a volunteer. I started noticing that people started reacting. Like all of a sudden, I have one kid that I volunteer with, and every time they leave the room at the end of our tutoring session, I say, "Remember, you're worthy, you're enough, and you're loved." And at first, the kid would cover their ears and was like,
Oh,
"Ah, I can't hear that." That's
yeah.
actually what they said. And then I now, when they walk out of the room, I'll be like, "Remember," and they'll stop and wait for me to say it.
Aw, that is so sweet. It sounds like to me that you view speaking as your opportunity to be like a hype woman. Like you are there to remind people that they're amazing. And we do need to hear it from other people. But as you just pointed out with the kid who covered their ears, it can be painful to hear kind things. Like I was just speaking to someone the other day and I don't remember what the context was, but I was like the unbearableness of love is the word we use. But I was basically talking about how, especially when I met my wife early on, and it was like, like she would say sweet things, and I'd be like, not, absolutely not. Like it was just everything about me was like, no, I can't do
Yes.
it. And so, because there's something about hearing love or hearing kind things after being deprived of it for so long, it's tender, like it hurts. It's like almost it touches that tender part, that wounded part, and you're like, "Oh, does this feel good? Do I like this, or is this awful?" Can't tell. It's so close. They're so close together. And so it sounds like for you, you want to be that voice who puts that out there, who can be that sounding board, who can remind people of the things maybe that they are starved to hear, that they really need to hear, but they're not getting it from other places. Do you feel that that's true? Is that how you see it too?
Yeah, I mean, this is really a message for everyone. I'm focused on middle and high school students because I'm trying to break the cycle as much as I
Yeah.
can, right? But I really do feel like everybody needs to hear this. I mean, I've done all this work, and I still like hearing, somebody tell me that they love me or that you're good enough to do that or whatever. It's
Yeah.
that we don't lose that, even if we have it, like even if we've done the work and we have that like ingrained knowledge in ourselves, it's still great to hear. And there's so many people who don't hear it, and
Oh,
don't
yeah.
feel
Yes. Yes,
that.
we know that. We know about that.
So I'm
Yes.
like, I love to talk. Talking is one of my favorite things to do. I am the extrovert, but and I will talk to anybody. And so I'm like, okay, I feel called to do this. I feel like this is something I'm supposed to share. And so here I am.
Well, you're great at it, and I know that you've already gotten a lot of great feedback about how much your message has helped other people. So I think that what you're doing is really important. I'm going to be that sounding board for you. What you're doing is super important. I think you got to keep doing it. People need that message. And I do know that youth in particular are really vulnerable. I remember there was a guy that came to one of our classes in high school, and he was talking to us, and I think he was just trying to suss out if anybody was having like abusive relationships. And at that particular moment, my relationship with my dad was especially, I mean, it was always painful, but it was especially painful. And I just started crying like in the back of the room, and I was like trying to be cool about it. Because, like in your high school, you're like, I don't want anyone to know I'm getting super upset by these things that this guy is saying. And he wasn't saying anything mean, it was like that, the burden of love, like the unbearable love thing. And so I was just like, oh my gosh. And then when I was trying to leave, he like was like, what you got there? Like he's like took the top book off of my like stack of books to make me stop and like look at him. And then I just like started confess. I was like, oh my god, my life is terrible. But it made me have this great conversation with the guidance counselor, because they immediately sent me from there to the guidance counselor. They were like, oh, okay, this girl needs to talk to somebody. But it's good to have someone there in the schools or in the classrooms doing that work, intercepting those kids, being a positive force, maybe when they have no one else in their life or in those moments to like break up the kind of the onslaught of misery that they're experiencing, right? To have someone else be like, hey, actually, you know what? It's not like that. And it's not going to be like that all the time. So, just hang in there. And so that's amazing. I think you're amazing.
Yeah.
And do you feel that so that you're saying these great things to help people think about themselves differently, but do you also feel like for you it's been very healing to share your story? Is there part of like a healing process that's been for you, getting it out there, sharing what's happened for you, your experiences as well?
Well, I feel like anytime we share our stories, they lose a little bit of the bite, right?
Mhm.
So something comes out of the closet and gets shared, it's no longer this dark, scary thing that's in the closet that nobody's talking about, right? So it comes out and we share it and it loses a little bit of its bite. So even if you don't go to therapy, share your stories.
Yeah, tell someone you trust, someone
Tell
that you
someone you trust,
don't
right?
tell the wrong person.
No, because you don't want somebody using it against you.
No,
But
or being even
yes,
just being dismissive, right? Like, or even just like dismiss, like you tell them something that to you feels huge, and they're like, "Oh, it's not a big deal." Like, I think I would feel really deflated. I'm like, "Well, it was really big for me." Like, I
right.
felt really terrible. So
Yeah, no, and I think that also hearing the stories, it reminds us that we're not alone, right? Because
yes,
it sometimes feels like I am the only one that this has ever happened to.
yeah,
And life can feel overwhelming when it feels that way. And so then when we find somebody who's maybe gone through something similar and the details are never exactly the same, right? You can even have
mhm,
two siblings that are being raised in the same household and they won't experience the same experience exactly the same. But when you find somebody who has shared something similar, like you and I both had a childhood being raised by a narcissist. So we have that in common and it makes us feel less alone.
yes, absolutely. I
Yeah,
think that's true.
yeah, and
And
it's really
so,
forming that connection between people.
absolutely, I want to second that. That it can be scary and vulnerable to share your story or your experiences with other people, but it really does open up a lot, I think, in helping you to get things out, air things that have happened, process them, and move past them. And so I want to wrap up with one final question. I want you to share with us, if you would be so kind, as to what is bringing you joy these days. So we talked about the spirit pillar, how it's very important. What's making you happy that maybe we want to know about? Like maybe I want that kind of joy. So tell me what you're doing or what you're deriving your joy from these days.
So I write in my journal, not always, but most mornings I write an intention. I always write an intention, but most mornings I write NSRG and it stands for nature, service, relationship, and God. So getting out in nature, hiking, that's always brings me joy. Service, so volunteering with these kids, that always brings me joy. If you think your life sucks, just go volunteer at your local school and you'll see that there's a lot of people who are struggling with things that you can't even imagine. Relationships, so I hang out with my friends and I'm intentional about it to spend time with my friends and my family. And then of course I spend time like doing a spiritual reading and journaling, and that's like kind of my time with God. And then ice cream, always ice cream, ice cream. Every single day.
I think ice cream is keeping a lot of us together. Now you're making me think about, I have some peppermint bark ice cream in the fridge right now, and I
Ooh.
think I need to make that happen after this interview. Or maybe during the after show. But yes, thank you so much. That's amazing. Tell us the letters again. In S
NSRG,
in
nature, service, relationships, God.
There we go. There's your journal prompt, guys, for some joy, identifying the things that are going to bring you some happiness this week. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Season. You were amazing. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Anyone who wants to check out all the amazing things that Season is doing, I'm going to put all of her links in the show notes below. You can check her out and what she's doing out in the world. Otherwise, I'm going to go over and have the after show with her. If you guys want to join us on the Patreon for a little bit more fun, we look forward to seeing you guys over there. But otherwise, I will be back next week with another episode of A Well Cared For Human. And until then, please take good care of you. This episode of A Well Cared For Human was written and produced by me, Kory Marie. The music was by Late Night Feeler and Esther Abrami. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider visiting my Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get early ad-free access to the episodes, as well as a monthly patrons-only Q&A, bonus videos, and more. Not to mention that your Patreon support lets me know that you find value in the show and want it to continue. You can find me on Patreon by visiting www.patreon.com/Kory Marie. If you can't support the show financially, that is okay. You can still subscribe to the show, leave a review of the show, and recommend the show to your friends, not just the neurotic ones. All of this helps so much. And as always, thank you for listening.